what was your topic of PhD? Can you explain in small brief, like not much, not
Okay,
less? I know because you have interested 4 years, so you have too much to talk. I want in brief.
of course. So as I said, I was working on comparison between Indian and Irish contemporary theater. Contemporary means like present day theater, right? And my
Yeah.
subject was representation of sexual violence.
Okay.
That's what I was working on. So essentially, how is sexual violence? It can be gender-based violence, it can be rape, and like several different instances. How are they represented on stage nowadays?
Mm.
So I wasn't reading the previous plays that have been there. I was reading the current plays, and it's just that one of the reasons is that Indian and Irish theater, despite being very similar and inspired by each other, had never been compared with each other without taking recourse to British theatre, right? So it's
Yeah.
always been British Irish, British Indian, hence
Indeed.
Irish and Indian, right? So it's never been just like Irish and Indian being compared together. It made sense
Yeah.
before when, we were like colonies of UK. It made sense then, but it makes no sense now that, we're independent yet
Yeah.
there's no comparison. So that was one reason why I decided to compare Indian and Irish. Also because I had the experience of stage and I was here to learn about Irish stage, right?
Yeah.
And the topic of sexual violence, I've always been interested in the topic. So even when like Nirbhaya case happened, I remember going out for protests and everything. And my MPhil dissertation that I did in JNU, that was on actual rape narratives. So actual
Mm.
survivors writing their own narratives. So that's what my
Okay.
PhD, sorry, my MPhil was on. So it's
Yeah.
not that it was suddenly decided in my head. It's just that I had, and when I was working with the UN, it was again another project that I was working on that studied how rape is reported in the news in India. So across India, right? So we covered several aspects of Northeast, Nagaland. We did a lot of things there. So it's not something new that I was like, oh, this sounds interesting. I had
Mm.
already been in the discipline. It's just that when I was doing my MPhil, it became really intense because those were real stories that I was dealing in,
Mm.
right? And
Mm.
I
Yeah, I can
thought
understand that.
I can't continue with the real stories because it's mentally taxing. So it's like
Mm.
I'll do representations of it, but I'm still interested in the subject. So that's why I did that.
Yeah, thank you very much for deep explanation. Quite difficult to understand, but I can see your intention why you did it, and maybe you have done good research about it. Like, I'm really sorry, I'm not sure how can we discuss this, but can we see, like, once you, like, is there any outcome of this PhD, or like can you like have
Yeah,
a broader perspective? What is
yeah.
difference? What is
I
similarity?
did
Something like that.
I did see it was a PhD, so I can't sum it up in three sentences. That's there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I will say certain things. So since this was contemporary, this is present day that we're talking about, right? There were a few things that I realized that India has this concept of honor, right?
Mm.
Like izzat and all. So there's no concept of honor here per se,
Mm.
but there's still
Mm.
this understanding of a family's reputation, right?
Mm. Yeah.
So in my findings, what I found was that the Irish society and Indian society are actually quite similar in a way
Mm.
they function, right? Land, for instance, is still like Bharat Mata,
Mm.
Same as like Inki be it's like Irish Mata, that's not the word, right?
Mm.
But it's
Mm.
just like Mother Erin and Queen Erin, right? So
Mm.
it's the same thing. So they're same renditions. So because they have been colonized by the same country, right? And because both of them are post-colonial nations, both of them are sort
Mm.
of developing nations, their realities are very similar, right? It's just that in the Irish sensibility, they identify more as in racially with the colonizer.
Mm.
That makes sense.
Correct.
I'm sorry if I complicate for you though,
No, no, no.
right?
I'm understanding as much as possible. Yeah.
So the thing is that they view violence in India as if, that is different from the violence that's happening here. Because in
Okay.
their head, India is this alternate reality where,
Mm.
whatever things happen because of whatever is portrayed in the news, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
in my PhD, what I found was they're actually extremely similar to the way that sexual violence is represented on stage. Of course, there are issues, for instance, um, here abortion is a massive issue, right? So you
Mm.
can't show. a woman aborting a child out of her own will on stage. You can't. You
Mm,
can't, right?
mm,
In India, LGBTQ representation of rape used to be a massive issue, right? For
mm.
instance, marital rape is a massive issue in India. So there are like certain differences as well that I was covering. But yeah, I won't
Oh,
go into that. It's like, let's keep it light.
yeah, I can understand that. And you have studied for 4 years, so it is very difficult for me to understand and cover this on small call like this. Thank
So,
you very much for explaining in easy words, maybe, and I understood somehow. So,
so happy I
so
could.
yeah. But this quite interesting topic actually. I just want to ask, like, what you feel it is similar in India and Ireland about this all sexual or like offense. It because sometimes I feel is like as Indians there is huge amount of uh like not literate people. There is lack of some education, and Ireland is all like I can see most of them are educated. So
Yeah.
is education is affecting this, or it's
No,
like
I don't think it's about education.
hmm,
I think, and so there is a difference between sexual violence in India, statistics, and
yeah.
everything. And it's not that it doesn't happen here despite the education. I think like it's a lot to do with the upbringing, the mentality that we have. It's similar here. I'm not saying it's like different. यहाँ की population बहुत छोटी है, so it's very
Hmm.
difficult to compare like India and
Yeah,
Ireland
yeah,
in
yeah.
that sense, right? But
Yeah.
I think it's a lot to do with, as I said, like the way that a man is brought up, despite their education, right? Despite
Okay.
like the things that they have, despite the fact that they're well off or not. It's a lot to do with like what you're taught, what your privileges are, or the fact that some men are like, oh, because I'm a man, I'm entitled to a certain things. Oh, yahan bhi hai. It's across.
Hmm.
Same. So like I've come across extremely arrogant uh people in Ireland as well, right? But the only thing is that here there is more awareness about your rights. There are
Hmm.
more avenues where you can go and complain, right?
Hmm.
And you will
Yeah.
be heard and you'll be acknowledged. I think
Yeah.
there are
Yeah.
more options available and there are more resources and supports available. India,
Correct.
there's also a stigma to utilize those resources. They're not there. Like for instance, therapy was one thing that I didn't have any awareness about when I was back in India. It's only when I came here that I realized that how normal and how good
Yeah.
it is. So,
Yeah. 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 In back in India, therapy is considered as taboo kind of thing. People don't
yeah,
talk about it.
now things are changing, but they're only changing for a certain like certain
Class.
class. Yeah, they're not changing for like others. Like so, yeah,
And India is not about Delhi, Mumbai, Pune, right? There are India is
exactly.
huge. We can't compare like if person
So,
in Delhi is saying it is
and
fine to
so-
go therapy.
exactly. So for me to say like. My husband is from UP and he often jokes about it. He's like, you know what? India is not equal to Delhi.
True.
And he also gives me a lot of checks sometimes because I am like a cosmopolitan person, born and brought up, have no exposure whatsoever. मेरे को Ireland का ज़्यादा exposure है rather than a lot of places in India, right?
Yeah.
So, so yeah, it's like a difficult thing to compare there. Yeah.